Israel heart Hamas. This time, using that heart in the title feels pretty offensive, but I left it anyway. Two violinists on opposing balconies playing different songs as the world awaits a shared melody. Also, the violinists are murdering everything. In southern Israel, Hamas terrorists broke into a room where a family of 5 was hiding and slaughtered every one of them. In Gaza, a father wrapped in gauze held his child, butchered in an Israeli strike, for the last time. These scenes pose a very simple moral test. Do you believe that it is wrong for innocent people to suffer in this way? That mass death should be deplored, not defended, regardless of who its victims are? If the answer to either of those questions is no, then you are a morally broken person. Currently, the Israeli government is preparing a ground invasion of Gaza that threatens to come with unimaginable human costs. The callousness with which they are talking about civilian deaths in Gaza is appalling. A parliamentarian from the ruling Likud party said on national television that Israel should not concern itself with the safety of any Gazans who chose to stay in the Gaza Strip. With crossings into Egypt and Israel blocked, Gazans could not leave if they wanted. Neither Israelis nor Palestinians can find justice through a mode of thinking that says only one kind of life is holy. We are not limited to a binary choice between the murderous theocrats of Hamas and the murderous theocrats of Israel's far right. Only by grounding our vision in universal humanity, the idea that every life is sacred and all people deserve our respect, can we ever figure out a way to break the cycle of violence dragging Israelis and Palestinians into hell. Language, cruelty, and moral evasion. The language of mass murder we're hearing is intentionally bloodless. A case in point of this moral evasion is an essay by Tariq Ali, a prominent British public intellectual. The elected leadership in Gaza begins to fight back, Ali crowed, asserting their right to do so by any means necessary. The language used is abstract and divorced from practical consequence because engaging with reality, with hard, cold human suffering, would disrupt the neat ideological picture that allows one to bask in one's own moral righteousness. It's true that Israel has overwhelming power and is using it to victimize Palestinians on a daily basis, turning Gaza into an open-air prison and colonizing the West Bank. It's also true that Hamas is a vicious group dedicated to a violently anti-Semitic worldview, one that has no qualms about brutalizing Palestinians and putting weapons in civilian-populated areas. In the quest to defend one's own side, language is turned into a tool of immorality. The problem with being anti-murder. Among some on the Western left, a subtly different position has also emerged. Not pro-Hamas terrorism exactly, but anti-Hamas. The basic idea is that condemning Hamas from afar is pointless in that it does not work to secure any concrete political end. We in the West, rather, have an obligation to point out the way in which our own government's support for Israel has created the conditions for apartheid and ongoing violence. It is important to call out concepts that may have some value, like decolonization, when they evolve into justifications for horrible violence, as a matter of ensuring the left does not, as a collective, lose sight of the ideals of universal human equality it claims to stand for. For anyone whose brain has not been broken by the fever dreams of Israeli and Palestinian radicals, there is only one way this decades-old conflict ends, with Israelis and Palestinians, including their leadership, finding a way to live in peace. Our role as foreigners should be to help foster this belief. This does not mean mealy-mouthed statements about peace, but specific interventions designed to push our individual governments towards fostering that sense of respect. A better way. After the current emergency, the Biden administration ought to reconsider what it can do to put pressure on Israel to cease its cruel and counterproductive policies. This moment, to put it mildly, is not a time when anything like that will happen. But what we can do now is bolster the forces who support peace and equality on the Israeli side in other ways. One of the most powerful tools available to Israel's own extremists is a perception that the world doesn't care about Israelis and Jews, that Israelis are on their own and need to do whatever it takes to protect their lives from Palestinian extremists. More broadly, as outside observers, we need to maintain basic human values in ourselves, to see the victims on both sides as humans, to care about suffering, and to attune our statements and activities toward finding ways forward that can improve the situation. We can and should extend sympathy to Israeli victims, but we should not let that shade into justification for retaliatory atrocities. We should condemn Hamas terrorism, but we should also condemn Israeli abuses against Gazans. Criticize Israel when it slaughters Palestinians, and criticize Palestinians when they slaughter Israelis. Note the asymmetries, both Israel's vastly superior power and Hamas's much greater disregard for rules about targeting civilians, but do not allow those differences to obscure the most basic moral truth, that human suffering is, in and of itself, wrong. This is not just how we say the right things about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it's how we, in the end, will figure out how best to contribute to peace down the line. To think otherwise and find fault only with one side leads to the moral oblivion of cheering the slaughter of children.